Yeah, I think I had to take it point by point. Of course, I tried to come out hot and just take all the opportunities that I
There's
could.
a moment right after a big win when an athlete stops being an athlete and just becomes a person again, still shaking, still catching their breath, still trying to process what the crowd noise even meant. That is exactly where we find Eala tonight in Toronto, fresh off a hard-fought match, still buzzing, still hyped, and about to say something that tells you everything about who she is. She admits it herself. She came out hot. She took every opportunity she could get because, in her words, her opponent does not give you much for free. Point by point, that was the plan, and point by point, it worked out the way she needed it to. But the real story of the night is not the scoreline sitting on a stat sheet somewhere. It is what happened after the final point, when she looked up from the baseline and actually saw the stands full of people who had shown up for her. Alex says she was still hyped walking off the court, so hyped it barely felt real even once the on-court interview wrapped up and she made it back to the locker room. She is refreshingly honest about why this particular win means so much to her right now. It came fast, right after another tournament, right in the middle of a stretch of raw emotion she says she has been carrying for the better part of 2 days. That is the part people never see on a scoreboard, the exhaustion hiding behind the smile, the mental toll of jumping from one event straight into the next, and the quiet kind of growth she says she is chasing every single time she steps back onto a court, whether she wins or not. Then someone in the room brings up Toronto itself, a city home to hundreds of thousands of people with Filipino roots, and asks what she would want to say to them as the tournament keeps moving forward. Her answer is simple and warm, no scripted lines, just gratitude. She wants to thank everyone who came out. She calls Toronto a genuinely multicultural city and says it felt special experiencing that atmosphere for the very first time in person. Out on court, she says she felt completely at home because of how loud and supportive the crowd was, and she hopes everyone who showed up walked away loving the tennis, loving the grounds, and wanting to come back for more matches down the line. That leads naturally into a bigger question, one about home. Not Toronto this time, but Manila. Someone asks how the sport has actually changed back in the Philippines, beyond just the flags and the noise in a foreign stadium, back where she originally grew up learning the game on cement courts and basketball courts simply because that is what was available to her as a kid. She laughs a little at the memory before answering. She says she genuinely wishes she could be home more often, but the tour keeps her moving constantly across time zones, and every single time she does manage to get back, the country feels a little different to her, a little more in love with tennis than it was the last time she left it behind. She hears about it online too, people of every age suddenly picking up rackets for the first time, sending her their own personal stories about how they discovered the sport. She calls it well-loved back home now, genuinely well-loved, and she says helping that momentum grow even further is something she truly wants to be part of, not just as a player but as someone the next generation can look up to. That is when the conversation turns to something even more personal, the tournament she actually got to play in Manila earlier this year, right after the Australian Open wrapped up. For most players on a packed calendar, one more stop is just one more stop, forgettable within a week. For her, this one carried real weight. She talks about how meaningful it was to finally have a WTA-level event in her own country and to be part of building it from the ground up, crediting the local organizers for pulling everything together and passing along all the good feedback she personally heard from both players and fans afterward. She hopes it continues for years and years to come, because she understands exactly what it means for young Filipino players, especially young women, to watch someone who looks like them, who grew up like them, compete seriously at home instead of only ever seeing it on a screen from a different continent. She compares it to the way kids around the world grow up attending their own home Grand Slam, building memories early on that eventually become real goals of their own later in life. She hopes Manila can become that same kind of full-circle moment for the next generation of Filipino players coming up behind her. Naturally, someone circles back to the topic of crowds, comparing tonight in Toronto to Australia against Alicia, and then to Dubai, asking if any single one of them stands out above all the rest in her memory. She will not pick a winner, and she seems almost reluctant to even try. She calls it genuinely difficult to compare, describing each crowd as its own distinct feeling, its own unique kind of energy that cannot really be measured against another. But she does light up talking about the flag she saw tonight specifically, so many Filipino flags scattered through the stands from top to bottom, and she calls that alone a real source of joy for her personally. Still, when pressed directly on Toronto versus Dubai, her honest answer is that they are neck and neck, genuinely impossible to separate. Finally, someone asks something smaller, almost offhand, whether she has any family or friends in Toronto, anyone who has been showing her around the city or giving her restaurant recommendations, that kind of casual detail. Her answer is disarming and a little funny. She says her family is spread out across the entire world, big enough that she genuinely worries she might forget someone if she starts trying to list names on the spot, and she apologizes in advance just in case she does. As for actually exploring the city itself, she admits there simply has not been much time for that yet. Right now, her daily routine is simple and repetitive: hotel to court, court back to hotel, nothing else in between. But she stays hopeful about it, saying that if she keeps performing well here through the week, maybe later on she will finally get a real chance to experience the city she has been quietly living in this whole time. It is a small, human ending to a night otherwise defined by big emotion. A reminder that behind every trophy moment and every roaring, flag-waving crowd is someone still trying to find time to just walk around the block, still a little homesick in the best possible way, still carrying an entire country with her wherever the tour takes her next. And maybe that is the real takeaway from tonight. Not the final score, not even the flags in the stands, but the quiet, steady way she keeps showing up for the people who show up for her, match after match, city after city, 1 point at a time.